Hey everyone and welcome to Medis. Today we are going to talk about South Tyrol, its troubled history and its current situation. South Tyrol, or officially the autonomous province of Bozen, South Tyrol, is the northernmost province of Italy. It is home to over 500,000 people, from which over 60% use German as their first language. Why is a country with a German-speaking majority part of Italy, you may ask? Well, to find that out, we have to take a look at South Tyrol's history. South Tyrol, emerging as its own political entity, was a relatively recent event. Before that, it was a part of the county of Tyrol, which itself was created way back in the 12th century as a state within the Holy Roman Empire. It was a part of the empire until 1805, and after that, of the newly formed Kingdom of Bavaria. It was however only a part of Bavaria for 9 years, before it was integrated into the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The division of Tyrol happened roughly 100 years later, when the Central Powers, which Austria-Hungary was a part of, lost World War I. In the year 1915, Italy joined the war on the side of the Entente. The Allies promised Italy the area of South Tyrol and the mainly Italian-speaking area of Trentino, as an incentive to join the war on their side. The two provinces were occupied by Italian forces in 1918 and finally annexed in 1919. The newly founded Republic of Austria wasn't happy about this turn of events, although they had no choice but to accept the loss of the region as a part of the Treaty of Versailles. With the rise of the fascist movement in Italy began an attempt to forcefully Italianize the South Tyrol province. One of the major events during this period was the so-called Bloody Sunday of Bozen. On the 24th of April 1921, around 300 fascist paramilitaries from all over Italy arrived in Bozen and united with 120 fascists there. They interrupted and attacked the participants and spectators of the traditional Spring Fair custom procession that was taking place there on this day with clubs, pistols and a grenade. Many South Tyroleans were injured and one was even killed. The Italian police and military didn't intervene and let this happen. They even escorted the aggressors to the railway station afterwards, so that they could leave unharmed. 2 years later, in 1923, the German language was removed from all public services and even the names of the German-speaking population were Italianized. As from 1925, Italian was made the sole language in all schools. All these things led to the founding of the so-called catacomb schools. Those schools were meant to secretly continue teaching students in German after the ban of the language there. But they had to be careful. Once a catacomb school was discovered by the authorities, the teachers and the parents of the students were harshly punished, by prison sentences and even banishing. The books and the money for the salary of the teachers came mostly from Germany and Austria. There were also underground resistance movements formed, like the Völkischer Kampfring Südtirols, that was founded by a national socialist called Peter Hofer. The main goal of these movements was the reunification with Austria and subsequently Germany. During the 1930s, there were attempts by the Italian government to turn the German-speaking population in South Tyrol into a minority, by relocating Italian-speaking people from other parts of the country there. A whole industrial district was created in Bozen to attract Italian companies to open factories there and create jobs for Italian speakers. They were lured with generous incentives like tax breaks and subsidies. This program turned out to be very effective, and the Italian-speaking population in South Tyrol grew from around 20,000 people in 1921 to over 80,000 people in 1939, which was around a third of the province's population back then. After the Anschluss of Austria in 1938 and the annexation of the Sudetenland, hopes grew in South Tyrol that they would be next. To their surprise, however, Adolf Hitler wanted to keep the borders between Germany and Italy as they were. He and Benito Mussolini reached an agreement in 1939 on how they would deal with the situation of the South Tyrolean people. The so-called option for Germany gave the German-speaking population the choice to either emigrate to Nazi Germany or to stay in Italy and lose all their minority rights. Around 85% of the population decided to go with the first option. Those who choose not to emigrate to Germany were oftentimes victims of acts of aggression from those who choose to go. Those acts were fueled by National Socialist propaganda. Although only around 30% of the population ended up actually emigrating to Germany during the Second World War. The reason why only so few of those who decided to leave actually left had many reasons. One of them was the fact that the jobs and accommodations they received in Germany didn't meet their expectations, and the compensation for the things they left behind in Italy wasn't paid off. Another big reason was that Germany occupied northern Italy in 1943, after Mussolini's government was overthrown and annexed South Tyrol during this action, which basically halted the immigration altogether. After the defeat of Germany and the Axis powers in 1945, around 25,000 immigrants returned to South Tyrol, although most of them turned stateless during the whole process and only received their Italian citizenship back in 1948. This led to a difficult situation, with many fake IDs being issued directly after the war. Many Nazi war criminals, among them big names like Adolf Eichmann or Josef Mengele, took advantage of this confusion and the fact that South Tyrol was the first German-speaking territory that has been left by the Allied troops. They used to hide there and later flee to South America. Since the war was over now, many South Tyroleans and Austrians were hoping to be united again. These hopes, however, were not fulfilled, as the Allies decided that they should remain a part of Italy. The province of South Tyrol was nonetheless, at least on paper, granted much more rights after an agreement was reached in Paris between Austria and Italy in 1946, the so-called First Autonomy Statute. The Italian government, however, did merge South Tyrol together with Trentino, and thus turned the German-speaking population into a minority, which meant that the political representatives of the Italian-speaking population hold the majority of the autonomous powers. This and many other discriminations led to dissatisfaction among the German-speaking population and resulted in protests against the government and especially against the plans to bring thousands of Italian-speaking migrants to South Tyrol. These protests also gained international recognition, and when a new Austrian Republic was formally founded in 1955, they now stepped up their support for South Tyrol. The Austrians started arguing with the Italian government about the bad implementation of the Paris Treaty. The Italians, however, weren't really interested in these talks, since they claimed that they implemented all important points of the agreement. Following the lack of interest on the Italian side to solve the issue, the Austrian government brought the case before the United Nations. Despite these negotiations, however, tensions within South Tyrol rose and resulted in several bombings that took place there in the 1950s. At the beginning, these bombings were organized by South Tyrolean terrorists that wanted more autonomy. Later bombings were, however, organized by neo-Nazi organizations, mostly in other German-speaking countries. They didn't want more autonomy for South Tyrol, but a complete secession from Italy. At first, those terrorist attacks targeted only infrastructure, especially power poles. Those bombings reached their peak in June of 1961, in the so-called Night of Fire. A total of 37 power poles had been blown up, 19 of these in the Bozen area alone. The goal of this operation was, among other things, to cut off the energy flows to the Bozen industrial zone, the very zone that was built by the fascist government during the 1930s in an attempt to Italianize the province. The terrorists could not achieve this goal that night, but still gained a lot of international attention, and at the request of Austria, the United Nations started to concern itself with South Tyrol once again. The people immediately involved with the bombings on the Night of Fire were detained, and some of them have allegedly been tortured by the Italian authorities. The leaders of the operation were sentenced to several years of imprisonment. Some of them could, however, flee to Austria and avoid their punishment. One famous member of the terrorist group was the Austrian Norbert Burger, who would in 1980 run as a candidate in the Austrian presidential election. Burger was also, for a few years, the father-in-law of Heinz Christian Strache, who would later become the head of the Austrian Freedom Party and Austrian Vice-Chancellor from December of 2017 until May of 2019. Strache, interestingly, even called for a reunification referendum with South Tyrol in as late as 2016. Despite the involvement of the United Nations, the bombings continued, and now they also targeted human lives. During the time from September 1956 until October 1988, there have been a total of 361 reported attacks, during which bombs, machine guns and mines had been used. At least 21 people were killed and 57 were injured. Many years of negotiations followed, and finally in 1971, an agreement between the Austrian, the Italian and the South Tyrolean government could be reached with the Second Autonomy Statute. This package of reforms contained, among other things, the delinking of South Tyrol from the mostly Italian-speaking province of Trentino, greater autonomy for South Tyrol within Italy, and the agreement of Austria not to interfere in South Tyrol's internal affairs. The German and Italian language would be made equal in the province. This agreement was broadly satisfactory for all sides, and the tensions in the province, including the separatist attacks, soon eased. What role the attacks in all those negotiations played, however, if they helped or if they harmed the process of gaining more autonomy in South Tyrol, is still highly controversial. After 20 years and the implementation of all the reforms, the Austrian government declared the dispute with Italy concerning South Tyrol to be over in 1992. Today, South Tyrol is the wealthiest province in Italy, with a GDP per capita of 47,100 euros in 2018, which is comparable to countries like Sweden, and it enjoys a high degree of autonomy. It still has strong ties to Austria, but since both Austria and Italy joined the European Union, the borders between the two countries basically disappeared, and the region today grows more and more together. Despite all of that, there are still some tensions between the different language groups in South Tyrol. Many of them don't speak the language of the other group, and frequent points of contention are, for example, street and town signs, and in which language or languages they should be in. Another reason is the big urban-rural divide between the Italian and German-speaking populations. Despite being the clear minority in the whole province, the Italian-speaking population is the clear majority in the capital city of Bozen. Some political parties in South Tyrol are still working towards a secession from Italy, and some Italian politicians also have a bad opinion of the province's autonomy, since it doesn't contribute as much to the transfer payments for the economically underdeveloped south of the country as the other neighboring regions. From time to time, some Austrian politicians, mainly from the right-wing Freedom Party, also call for a secession referendum. The most recent poll for such a move was conducted in 2013, where 54% of the German-speaking and 46% of the whole South Tyrolean population stated that they would favor a secession from Italy. All that being said, I think that the overall situation there today is generally pretty good for all sides involved. For example, the different languages are all equally represented in public offices, according to the share of the population. Even though it was a long and difficult journey until then, the South Tyrol solution may serve as a good example on how countries should attempt to deal with minority populations within their borders. Thank you for watching this video, see you next time.